The first light of dawn filters through the wire mesh, casting long shadows across the wooden perches where my birds rest, their heads tucked beneath their wings, still lost in whatever dreams pigeons have. I've been coming to this loft for 17 years now, and every single morning begins the same way. The soft creak of the door, the gentle cooing that starts low and builds as they recognize my footsteps, the way the light catches the iridescent feathers of my old champion, Thunder, as he stretches his wings and looks at me with those bright, knowing eyes. There's something sacred about these first moments before the world wakes up, when it's just me and my birds and the quiet promise of another day. People ask me all the time what it takes to raise a champion racing pigeon. They want to know about bloodlines and training methods, about feeding schedules and vitamin supplements. And yes, those things matter. But if I'm being honest, really honest, it's not about any of that. It's about something much deeper, much more fundamental. It's about understanding that every single bird in this loft is an individual, with their own personality, their own fears, their own dreams of flight. It's about patience when everything in our fast-paced world tells us to hurry. It's about trust built one grain of corn at a time, one gentle touch at a time, one quiet conversation at a time. I remember the first pigeon I ever held. I was 12 years old visiting my grandfather's loft, and he placed this small, trembling bird in my cupped hands. I could feel its heart beating so fast, like a tiny drum against my palm. "Feel that," he said, his weather hands covering mine. "That's the heart of a flyer. That's the heart that will carry this bird 500 miles home." I didn't understand then what he meant. I thought he was talking about stamina, about physical strength. But now, after all these years, I know he was talking about something else entirely. He was talking about spirit. My grandfather's loft was smaller than mine, more rustic, built from salvaged wood and wire mesh that had seen better days. But was filled with champions. Birds that had won races across 3 states, birds whose bloodlines stretched back generations, birds that seemed to understand their purpose in life with a clarity that I envied. I would spend hours there during summer visits, watching him work, learning to read the subtle signs that distinguished a good bird from a great one. He taught me that breeding racing pigeons isn't just about genetics, though bloodlines certainly matter. It's about understanding the soul of each bird, about recognizing their potential not just for speed, but for heart. "Anyone can breed fast pigeons," he used to say, running his gnarled fingers along a bird's breast to feel its muscle development. "But only someone who truly understands these creatures can breed birds with the will to come home." The morning routine never changes, and that's by design. Consistency is everything in this world. I start at the far end of the loft, checking each perch, each bird, looking for any signs of distress or illness. You learn to read pigeons like a book once you've spent enough time with them. The way Thunder holds his head tells me he's feeling strong today. The slight droop in Duchess's left wing tells me she needs to be checked more carefully. Lightning's aggressive cooing means he's ready to defend his territory, which is always a good sign in a racer. But there's more to the morning inspection than just physical health. There's the social dynamic of the loft to consider. Pigeons are incredibly social creatures, with complex hierarchies and relationships that can affect their racing performance. I watch how they interact with each other, who's challenging whom, who's forming new partnerships, who might be stressed by changes in the group dynamic. A bird that's being bullied will never race well. A bird that's too aggressive might exhaust itself fighting instead of flying. I run my hands along their bodies, feeling for any changes in weight, any lumps or bumps that shouldn't be there. Their feathers should feel smooth and tight, not loose or ruffled. I check their eyes, which should be bright and clear, not cloudy or watery. I examine their beaks, their feet, even the way they stand on their perches. Every detail matters. Every small change could be the difference between a champion and a bird that never makes it home. The weight check is crucial. I have a small scale in the loft, and I weigh each racing bird twice a week during training season. A bird that's losing weight might be fighting an infection. A bird that's gaining weight might be getting too comfortable, losing the lean muscle mass that makes for efficient flight. The ideal racing pigeon feels solid but not heavy, muscular but not bulky. They should feel like athletes because that's exactly what they are. But it's not just about the physical examination. It's about the conversation. I talk to each bird as I check them, asking about their night, telling them about the weather, sharing my plans for the day. I know it sounds crazy to people who don't understand, but these birds listen. They respond. Thunder always tilts his head when I mention his name. Duchess makes a particular soft cooing sound when I tell her she's beautiful. Lightning stomps his feet when I tease him about being too aggressive. These aren't just random behaviors. This is communication. This is relationship. I've learned to distinguish between at least 12 different types of pigeon vocalizations, each with its own meaning and context. There's the soft, contented cooing of a bird that's relaxed and happy. There's the sharp, alarm call that means danger has been spotted. There's the aggressive growling that means territorial boundaries are being established. There's the gentle, almost musical trilling that pairs use to communicate with each other. And there's the excited, rapid-fire chattering that happens when the birds see me approaching with food. Feeding time is probably the most important part of the day, and not just because the birds need nutrition. It's because this is when trust is built, when bonds are strengthened, when I can observe their individual personalities and needs. I don't just pour feed into a trough and walk away. I feed each bird individually by hand, watching how they eat, how they interact with me, how they respond to my voice and my presence. The feed itself is a carefully balanced mixture that I've spent years perfecting. The base is a high-quality racing mix containing various grains and seeds. Corn for energy, wheat for sustained flight, peas for protein, sunflower seeds for oil and vitamins. But that's just the beginning. I add barley for digestive health, millet for variety, safflower seeds for their high oil content. During racing season, I increase the protein content. During breeding season, I add calcium supplements. During molting season, I focus on foods that support healthy feather growth. But more than the specific ingredients, it's about the philosophy behind the feeding. I'm not just giving them fuel for their bodies. I'm giving them energy for their souls. I'm telling them, through my actions, that they are valued, that they are loved, that they are worth the time and effort it takes to do this right. And they understand this. They know the difference between someone who feeds them because they have to and someone who feeds them because they care. I watch Thunder approach my outstretched hand, and I see the same cautious trust that I've been building with him for 8 years. He was a nervous bird when he first came to me, rescued from a breeder who didn't understand that fear and aggression are not the same thing. Thunder wasn't aggressive. He was terrified. He'd been handled roughly, fed inconsistently, treated more like a racing machine than a living being. It took months of patient work to earn his trust, months of gentle voices and slow movements, and respecting his boundaries. The rehabilitation process with Thunder taught me more about pigeon psychology than any book or manual ever could. I learned that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. I learned that consistency is more important than intensity. I learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for a traumatized bird is simply to be present, to exist in their space without demanding anything in return. For the first 3 weeks, Thunder wouldn't even eat in my presence. He would wait until I left the loft, then rush to the feed tray, eat quickly, and retreat to the highest perch he could find. I started sitting quietly in the loft for hours, not moving, not speaking, just being there until he became accustomed to my presence. Slowly, gradually, he began to relax. The first time he ate while I was in the loft, I felt like I had won the lottery. The first time he ate from my hand, I almost cried. Such a simple thing, but it represented so much more. It meant he was starting to believe that not all humans would hurt him. It meant he was beginning to understand that this place, this loft, could be a home rather than just a prison. It meant that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to fly not out of fear, but out of joy. Thunder's transformation from a broken, fearful bird to a confident champion taught me that every pigeon has the potential for greatness, given the right environment and care. His first race victory came 2 years after his rescue, and when he landed in my hands that day, exhausted but triumphant, I could feel the pride radiating from his small body. He had overcome not just the physical challenges of the race, but the psychological barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Training begins with trust, but it continues with patience. You can't rush a pigeon's development any more than you can rush a child's. Each bird learns at their own pace, in their own way, and part of being a good breeder is understanding and respecting those differences. Some birds are naturally bold, ready to explore and push boundaries from a moment they're old enough to fly. Others are more cautious, preferring to watch and learn before taking risks. I remember Duchess's first flight like it was yesterday. She was one of the cautious ones, spending weeks watching the other birds come and go while she stayed safely on her perch. I never forced her. I never pushed her beyond what she was ready for. I just kept the loft door open, kept encouraging her with my voice, kept showing her that the world outside was safe and welcoming. And then one morning, without any fanfare or drama, she simply spread her wings and flew out into the dawn sky. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. The training progression is carefully structured, though it must be adapted to each individual bird's readiness and ability. We start with what I call confidence building, simply having the loft door open so the young birds can see the outside world, can watch the older birds come and go, can begin to understand that the loft is a safe base from which to explore. Some birds are ready for this at 8 weeks old. Others need 12 weeks or more. The first actual flights are just short hops to the roof of a loft, then back inside. I stay nearby, talking to them, encouraging them, making sure they know I'm there if they need reassurance. Gradually, the flights extend to nearby trees, then to the edge of the property, then around the neighborhood. Each flight builds on the last one, gradually extending the distance, gradually increasing the challenge. But it's not just about physical conditioning. It's about mental preparation. Racing pigeons face incredible challenges when they're released hundreds of miles from home. They encounter weather they've never experienced, landscapes they've never seen, obstacles they've never had to navigate. The birds that make a home aren't necessarily the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones with the strongest sense of home, the deepest desire to return, the most complete trust in their own abilities. I've seen birds return from training flights with their tail feathers bent from wind, their eyes bright with the excitement of having conquered a new challenge. I've seen them huddle together after a particularly difficult flight, sharing what appeared to be conversation about their experience. I've seen them teach each other, with older birds showing younger ones the best routes, the safest landing spots, the most efficient flight patterns. The psychology of homing is fascinating and not fully understood even by scientists. How does a pigeon released 500 miles from home know which direction to fly? How do they navigate through storms and fog and unfamiliar territory? How do they maintain their sense of direction when they can't see the sun or stars? These are questions that have puzzled researchers for decades, and while we have some theories, magnetic fields, infrasound, landmark recognition, the full picture remains a mystery. What I do know is that the strongest homing instinct comes from emotional attachment to the loft and the people who care for the birds. A pigeon that feels love, that has positive associations with home, that knows it will be welcomed back with food and shelter and affection, will fight harder to return than a bird that has only mechanical care. This is why the relationship between breeder and bird is so crucial. That's why the relationship between breeder and bird is so crucial. A pigeon that trusts its human, that knows it's valued and loved, that has positive associations with the loft and the food and the daily routine, will fight harder to get home. It will push through exhaustion and confusion and fear because it knows what's waiting for it at the end of the journey. It knows that someone cares whether it makes it back or not. I've seen birds return from races so exhausted they can barely stand, their eyes glazed with fatigue, their bodies pushed to the absolute limit of endurance. But they made it. They fought through whatever obstacles they encountered because they had something to fight for. They had a reason to come home. I've held birds that were so tired they couldn't even lift their heads, but whose eyes still held that spark of accomplishment, that quiet pride in having completed their mission. The weather plays a huge role in racing, and part of my job is teaching the birds to handle different conditions. Spring training flights in gentle breezes are very different from summer training in thunderstorms or autumn training in crosswinds. Each type of weather presents unique challenges and opportunities, and a well-trained racing pigeon needs to be prepared for all of them. Rain is particularly challenging because it makes the birds heavier and reduces their visibility. I've seen birds wait out storms in barns and under bridges, instinctively knowing that attempting to fly in dangerous weather is counterproductive. The smart ones learn to read the sky, to recognize the signs of approaching bad weather, to plan their flights accordingly. Wind can be either a help or a hindrance, depending on its direction and strength. A tailwind can push a bird to record speeds, but it can also disorient them, making it harder to maintain their desired heading. A headwind slows them down, but can actually help with navigation by providing consistent sensory input. Crosswinds are the most challenging, requiring constant course corrections and increasing fatigue. Not every bird becomes a champion, of course. Not every bird even becomes a good racer. Some are better suited for breeding, passing on their genetic gifts to the next generation. Others are simply companion birds, content to live out their days in the loft, providing social stability for the more competitive birds. And that's okay. That's more than okay. Every bird in this loft has value, every bird has a purpose, every bird deserves respect and care regardless of their racing ability. I think about Flash, who never won a single race, but who taught me more about courage than any champion ever could. He was a small bird, always the underdog, always outclassed by bigger, stronger, more naturally gifted racers. But he never gave up. He never stopped trying. He would return from races hours after the winners, sometimes barely able to fly, but he always came home. He never quit on me, so I never quit on him. Flash's story is one of heart over talent, of determination over natural ability. He wasn't built like a racing pigeon, too small, too light, without the powerful breast muscles that characterize the best flyers. But what he lacked in physical gifts, he made up for in spirit. Every race was a personal marathon for him, every homecoming a victory against the odds. I remember one particularly difficult race where Flash was released with 20 other birds in challenging weather conditions. Storms were moving through the area, and the winds were gusting to 40 miles per hour. 17 birds made a home that day, but Flash wasn't among them. As evening approached, I began to worry. Had he been caught in the storm? Had he been forced to land somewhere unsafe? Had he finally encountered a challenge too great for his small body to overcome? I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but I left the loft light on just in case. At 3 in the morning, I heard the familiar sound of wings against the wire mesh. I rushed outside, and there was Flash, clinging to the entrance, too exhausted to fly the final few feet to his perch. He had been flying for nearly 18 hours, probably taking shelter multiple times, probably getting lost, and having to find his way back on course. But he made it. He came home. The day Flash died, I held him in my hands the same way I had held that first pigeon all those years ago in my grandfather's loft. I could feel his heart slowing, could see the light fading from his eyes, and I whispered to him all the things I should have said when he was healthy and strong. I told him he was brave. I told him he was loved. I told him he was a champion in every way that mattered. The grief I felt at losing Flash surprised me with its intensity. I had lost birds before, of course, to predators, to accidents, to illness, to old age. But Flash's death hit me differently. Maybe because he had tried so hard, had given so much of himself, had taught me so much about perseverance and heart. Maybe because he represented something pure and noble in a world that often seems to value only winning. The bonds you form with these birds are deeper than most people understand. They're not pets in the traditional sense, not livestock in the commercial sense. They're partners. They're family. They're teachers who show you lessons about loyalty and perseverance and the meaning of home. They're mirrors that reflect back your own capacity for patience and love and dedication. I've spent countless hours in this loft, through good times and bad, through personal struggles and triumphs, through moments of doubt and moments of absolute certainty. The birds have been there through all of it, providing a constant source of purpose and meaning. When my marriage fell apart, I came to the loft. When my father died, I came to the loft. When I lost my job, when I questioned everything about my life and my choices, I came to the loft. And the birds were always there, always constant, always reminding me that some things endure, that some bonds transcend the temporary troubles of human existence. The divorce was particularly difficult. 17 years of marriage ending in lawyers and arguments and the division of possessions. My ex-wife never understood my devotion to the birds, never saw them as anything more than an expensive hobby. During the settlement negotiations, she wanted me to sell the loft, to liquidate what she saw as an asset. I fought harder for those birds than I fought for anything else in that divorce. They weren't just possessions to be divided. They were family. The loft became my sanctuary during that dark period. While my personal life was falling apart, while I was struggling with loneliness and uncertainty about the future, the birds provided stability. They still needed to be fed every morning. They still needed their training flights. They still needed someone to care about their health and welfare. In caring for them, I found a reason to keep going, a purpose that transcended my personal problems. My father's death was different, but equally challenging. He had been sick for months, and I had spent countless hours at the hospital, watching him grow weaker, watching the man who had taught me so much about life and strength slowly fade away. The morning he died, I came straight to the loft. I sat among the birds and cried, and somehow their presence, their gentle cooing, their simple acceptance of my grief, provided more comfort than any words could have. The preparation for a major race begins weeks in advance. It's not just about physical conditioning, though that's certainly important. It's about mental preparation, about building confidence, about fine-tuning every aspect of their health and well-being. I increased their training flights gradually, pushing them a little further each time, watching for signs of fatigue or stress. I adjust their diet, adding extra vitamins and supplements to support their immune systems. I monitor their weight daily, their energy levels, their social interactions with the other birds. The feeding regime during race preparation is precise and calculated. 2 months before a major race, I switch to a higher protein diet to support muscle development. 1 month before, I add extra vitamins and minerals to boost their immune systems. 1 week before, I reduce the quantity slightly to ensure they're racing at optimal weight. The day before the race, they get a light meal of easily digestible grains, nothing that will sit heavy in their stomachs during the long flight home. But more than anything, I talk to them. I tell them about the race, about the challenge they're going to face, about my confidence in their ability to succeed. I know it sounds silly, but I believe they understand more than we give them credit for. I believe they can sense our emotions, our expectations, our fears and hopes. And I believe that our confidence in them becomes their confidence in themselves. The night before a race, I spend extra time in the loft, checking on each bird, making sure they're calm and ready. Some birds get nervous before races, pacing on their perches, unable to settle. Others become very still, conserving energy for the challenge ahead. I've learned to read these individual responses to know which birds need extra reassurance and which ones prefer to be left alone with their thoughts. Thunder always becomes very focused before a race, almost meditative. He'll find a quiet corner of the loft and sit perfectly still, occasionally opening his eyes to look at me when I speak to him, but otherwise seeming to be in some sort of trance. Duchess, on the other hand, becomes social, seeking out interaction with the other birds, as if drawing strength from the flock. Lightning becomes restless, flying short circuits within the loft, checking and rechecking his territory. The morning of a race is always emotional. I wake up before dawn, earlier than usual, and spend extra time with each bird that's competing. I check them one final time, looking for any last-minute concerns, any reasons to hold a bird back. I feed them a light breakfast, just enough to give them energy without weighing them down. I talk to them about the journey ahead, about the importance of staying calm, about remembering their training. The transportation to the release point is crucial. The birds travel in special crates designed to be comfortable and secure, with enough space to stand and turn around, but not so much that they're thrown about during the journey. I use my own truck when possible, driving carefully to avoid stress, playing soft music to keep them calm. Some breeders use professional transport services, but I prefer to handle this myself when I can. It's one more opportunity to monitor their condition, to provide reassurance, to maintain the bond that's so important to their performance. At the release point, there's always a mixture of excitement and nervousness among the breeders. We check in our birds, have them examined by race officials, verify their identification bands. There's camaraderie among the participants, but also competition. These people are my friends, but they're also my rivals. We share knowledge and advice, but we also guard our secrets. It's a complex dynamic that adds another layer to the sport. And then comes the moment of release. I place each bird in its transportation crate, and I can feel their excitement, their nervous energy, their readiness to fly. They know what's coming. They've been through this before. They understand that this is what they were born for, what they've been training for, what gives their lives meaning and purpose. The actual release is always dramatic. Hundreds of birds erupting from their crates simultaneously, explosion of wings and feathers and energy. They circle the release point several times, getting their bearings, orienting themselves to the sun and the magnetic fields and whatever other navigational cues they use. Then, as if responding to some invisible signal, they form into loose formations and begin their journey home. I watch them disappear into the distance, and I feel a mixture of pride and anxiety. Pride in their conditioning, their training, their readiness for the challenge. Anxiety about the dangers they'll face, the obstacles they'll encounter, the possibility that some of them might not make it home. Racing pigeons face real dangers, predators, weather, power lines, tall buildings, exhaustion. Not every bird that starts a race finishes it. The hours after the release are the hardest. You can't do anything but wait. You can't help them navigate the challenges they're facing. You can't encourage them when they're tired or scared or lost. You can only trust in the training you've provided, the relationship you've built, the bond that connects you across hundreds of miles of empty sky. I usually spend those hours in the loft, maintaining the daily routine, caring for the birds that didn't race, but my mind is always on the sky, always wondering where my racers are, how they're doing, whether they're safe. I listen to weather reports, checking for storms or wind conditions that might affect their flight. I prepare the loft for their return, making sure fresh water is available, that their favorite perches are clean and ready. The waiting is torture. I find myself checking the time constantly, calculating how long it should take for the fastest birds to return, when I should start watching the sky seriously. I clean the loft for the third time. I organize feed bins they're already organized. I check and recheck the electronic timing system that will record their arrivals. Anything to keep busy, anything to distract myself from the worry. Other breeders deal with the waiting differently. Some go about their normal business, trusting that the birds will return when they return. Others gather with friends, sharing stories and speculation about how the race is progressing. A few become obsessive, standing outside scanning the sky for hours, as if their vigilance could somehow help their birds find their way home. And then, if you're lucky, you hear it. The sound of wings cutting through the air, the familiar whistle of a pigeon coming home. You rush outside and look up, and there they are, your birds, your partners, your champions, dropping out of the sky like feathered miracles, tired but triumphant, ready to be welcomed home. The moment when Thunder landed after his first major race victory, I felt something I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just pride in his accomplishment, though that was certainly part of it. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the privilege of being part of his journey, for the trust he'd placed in me, for the opportunity to witness something so pure and beautiful and true. He had flown 300 miles in challenging conditions, had navigated obstacles and weather and fatigue, had pushed himself to his limits and beyond, all to return to this loft, to this place he called home. I picked him up gently, feeling his exhaustion, his relief, his satisfaction at a job well done. His feathers were ruffled from a wind, his eyes bright with the intensity of the experience he'd just endured. I could feel his heart beating strong and steady, the same heart I'd monitored every morning for years, the same heart that had carried him home against all odds. The victory celebration was subdued, as it always is. These birds have just completed an incredible physical and mental challenge. They need food, water, rest, and quiet. The time for celebration would come later, after they had recovered, after I had made sure they were healthy and uninjured. In the immediate aftermath of a race, my job is to provide care and comfort, not excitement. But privately, in the quiet moments after the birds had settled for the night, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had been accomplished. Thunder had not just won a race. He had overcome his traumatic past, had learned to trust again, had found the courage to push himself beyond what he thought possible. He had become the champion I always knew he could be. The trophies and ribbons are nice, but they're not why I do this. I do this for moments like these, for the privilege of being part of something larger than myself, for the opportunity to witness the triumph of spirit over circumstance. I do this for the daily reminder that greatness comes not from genetics or luck, but from dedication and love and the willingness to persevere when everything seems stacked against you. That's what it takes to raise a champion racing pigeon. It's not about bloodlines or supplements or training techniques, though those things certainly matter. It's about relationship. It's about trust. It's about understanding that every bird is an individual with their own needs, their own fears, their own dreams. It's about patience when everything around you demands speed. It's about faith when logic suggests doubt. It's about love when the world tells you it's just business. The birds have taught me more about life than any human teacher ever could. They've shown me that true strength isn't about winning races or accumulating trophies. It's about perseverance in the face of adversity. It's about loyalty to those who have earned it. It's about the courage to leave safety behind in pursuit of something greater, and the wisdom to know when it's time to come home. They've taught me that success isn't measured in speed or distance, but in the quality of the journey, the integrity of the effort, the depth of the commitment. Flash never won a race, but he taught me about courage. Duchess was never the fastest, but she taught me about patience. Thunder has won more races than I can count, but his greatest victory was learning to trust again after being broken by those who should have protected him. The lessons extend beyond the loft, into every aspect of my life. The patience I've learned with the birds has made me a better person in my relationships with humans. The consistency I've developed in caring for them has improved my work ethic. The trust I've built with them has taught me about the importance of reliability and honesty in all my dealings. I've learned that true mastery of any skill requires not just knowledge, but wisdom. Knowledge can be taught from books and manuals. Wisdom comes from experience, from making mistakes, from learning to read the subtle signs that can't be captured in words. After 17 years, I'm still learning, still discovering new things about these remarkable birds, still being surprised by their intelligence and resilience. The breeding aspect of pigeon racing is an art form in itself. Selecting which birds to pair together, predicting which genetic combinations will produce the best offspring, understanding the complex interplay of bloodlines and characteristics that determine a bird's potential, these are skills that take decades to develop. It's not enough to simply put two good birds together and hope for the best. You need to understand their histories, their strengths and weaknesses, their genetic compatibility. I keep detailed records of every bird in my loft. Not just their racing performance, but their health history, their breeding history, their behavioral characteristics. I track which birds produce the best offspring, which bloodlines work well together, which genetic combinations tend to produce birds with specific traits. This database has become invaluable in making breeding decisions. But genetics is only part of the equation. The environment in which young birds are raised is equally important. They need proper nutrition, appropriate social interaction, gradual introduction to training, and most importantly, they need to bond with their human caretaker. A bird with perfect genetics raised in a sterile, impersonal environment will never reach its potential. Every morning when I open the loft door and step into that sacred space, I'm reminded of the privilege it is to be part of this ancient partnership between human and bird. Racing pigeons have been carrying messages, finding their way home, demonstrating the power of loyalty and determination for thousands of years. We are the inheritors of this tradition, the guardians of this knowledge, the keepers of this flame. The history of pigeon racing stretches back to ancient times. The Egyptians used pigeons to carry messages. The Greeks used them to announce Olympic victories. During both world wars, pigeons carried crucial military communications, often flying through enemy fire to deliver messages that saved lives. Some of these birds received military medals for their service, recognition of their courage and dedication. This heritage weighs on me sometimes. I'm not just raising birds for my own enjoyment or competition. I'm preserving a tradition that has been passed down through generations, maintaining bloodlines that may have been carefully developed over centuries. Every decision I make affects not just the birds in my loft, but the future of the sport itself. The sport has faced challenges in recent years. Urban development has reduced the number of suitable loft locations. Environmental changes have affected migration patterns and navigation. New technologies have made traditional communication methods obsolete. But the core appeal of pigeon racing remains unchanged, the marvel of watching a bird navigate hundreds of miles to return to the place it calls home. The loft is quiet now as the sun reaches its peak, the birds resting in the afternoon warmth, their morning routines complete. Thunder dozes on his favorite perch, one eye occasionally opening to check on the world around him. Duchess preens her feathers with careful attention to detail. Lightning stands guard at the entrance, alert for any signs of danger. And I sit among them, grateful for another day in their company, another opportunity to witness the miracle of their existence. The afternoon is a time for reflection, for quiet observation, for simply being present with these remarkable creatures. I watch their interactions, their social dynamics, their individual personalities expressing themselves in countless small ways. Each bird has its own rhythm, its own preferences, its own way of moving through the world. Some people might find it boring, this quiet time in the loft. But for me, it's meditation. It's a chance to slow down, to observe without judgment, to appreciate the simple beauty of these birds just being themselves. In a world that constantly demands action and achievement, the loft offers a sanctuary of peace and mindfulness. Tomorrow will bring another dawn, another routine, another chance to strengthen the bonds that connect us. There will be new challenges to face, new lessons to learn, new moments of triumph and disappointment, and everything in between. But through it all, there will be the constant presence of these remarkable birds, these teachers, these partners, these friends who have chosen to share their lives with me. The future of my loft is something I think about more often as I get older. Who will care for these birds when I'm no longer able? Who will maintain the bloodlines I've worked so hard to develop? Who will remember the individual stories of birds like Thunder and Flash and Duchess? These aren't just concerns about assets or possessions. These are concerns about family, about legacy, about the continuation of something beautiful and meaningful. I've been training a young neighbor, Sarah, who has shown genuine interest in the birds. She comes by several times a week, helping with feeding and cleaning, learning to read the subtle signs of health and behavior. She has the patience and gentleness that this work requires. Maybe she'll be the one to carry on when I can no longer do it myself. But for now, I'm still here, still able to provide the care and attention these birds deserve. I'm still learning, still growing, still discovering new depths to this ancient partnership. Every day brings new opportunities to witness their intelligence, their loyalty, their remarkable ability to find their way home across vast distances. The light is beginning to fade now, painting the loft in shades of gold and amber. Soon it will be time for the evening routine, the final check of the day, the gentle goodnight wishes that will send my birds into peaceful sleep. And in the morning, we'll begin again, this endless cycle of care and training and trust and love that defines our days and gives our lives meaning. The evening feeding is different from a morning meal. It's more relaxed, more social. The birds gather around me as I distribute,